If power electronics is supposed to be repulsive, harsh, disturbing, violent, then what would powerless electronics sound like? The cover artwork for the self-titled Powerless Electronics album from earlier this year depicts somebody's face, being pushed up against a glass. It's frosty, smudgy, looks pretty uncomfortable actually. In a rather poor attempt for me to connect this to the music, I actually do get a perfect sense of what the album feels like, if only because the soundscapes, aside from initially sounding like dial-up internet, make me feel like I'm being pushed resistantly through the physical makeup of the world and entering the kind of void that you fall into when the chunks haven't loaded in Minecraft. It's riddled with discomfort, actually a little bit painful, and ultimately you feel a bit lost by the end of it. For this reason, that album feels fragmented, directionless, but somehow the sonic concepts of it still beckons me. It's like a sound chip crying for help. Sad. For as many soundscapes exist in the Powerless Electronics world that twitch like my eyelid does when I haven't caught enough sleep, All Good Things Come in Threes, the debut on Speak and Spell Records, expands and progresses their concept to a level that is both patience testing and sonically challenging. But in doing that, they've whacked their head on the ceiling of exceptional quality already, mainly because what they do to challenge the eardrums is amuck with textures that all have camaraderie with one another. All Good Things Come in Threes is a freaky batch of digital business. Track 2 sounds like it would have been a free jazz piece, except performed by a big brass band, where the musicians have all been turned into missing nose, and the whole thing gets swallowed up by this rumbling, crushing cloud of digital dust. The melody writing on this album has a fairly hooky quality, as you'll hear demonstrated on track 3, which begins like a bit of an ostinato, just a loop that'll motif its way into another phase of the track, except the melody gets a little bit whimsical and starts floating up, 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 and down, 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 and it disorients you a little bit. It feels like rules are being broken just as you're expecting them to be followed. It keeps you guessing with these discordant melodies, and they follow a rhythmic pattern, but melodically refuse to meet you halfway. There's a stronger sense of textural variety on All Good Things, which makes up for the distinct lack of a particular progression over the course of the album, which probably would be the next best step if they wanted to see how much further they could take this fascinating sound. Track 8, which is 8 minutes and 8 seconds long, is the literal midsection mark of the album, falling like hailstones that never quite hit the ground properly, and the preceding track 9, Paper Moon, drones on with these long, yawning notes that begin dissonant and eventually find a means of harmonizing. For something so linear, it manages to shift through an impressive range of moods, like that one kombucha girl. Monolith ends the album perfectly. You'd expect something sentimental and sappy that sails the album away really nicely like a friendly wave goodbye, but the album does a lot more than that and makes it sound like a fanfare that's slowly becoming harder and harder to hear, up until the point when the dream snaps apart and you wake up. It's exactly what I expected, to be honest, but the sound design is what makes it so effective. It's a ton of crushing things happening at once until the weight can support it no longer. The program crashes and you have a blank desktop, a bit like one of those programs in a creepypasta, except with a bit more depth than just some jazz jackrabbit bootleg that comes out of the screen and munches your kneecaps. Fuck, I don't know. So often you'll get ambient glitch records that are decent for the time being, but are a little bit vague and indescript. And no, the concept of this album isn't clear either, but what you're given musically is so vivid. It's like you don't even need a concept to start with. You can kind of use your imagination and map out your own as you're listening to the world jiggy piece itself together. So put on those overalls, enter the world of Powerless Electronics, and get jiggy with it, cause I am. 8 out of 10.